Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of LabTalks Live. This is episode 3. It's my pleasure today to be joined by Jolyon Layard Horsfall. Can you give us a brief introduction to you, what you do, what you've done, and we'll take it from there?
Thanks so much. I got my Wag Me socks on today, mate. So I was feeling like extra bullet. So that's a big positive in a rainy London day.
It's miserable today, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm one of the co-founders of Zebu Live and Flight3. It used to be Zebu Digital, Zebu Live, but then we got pulled into the Flight3 group, which was very exciting last year. But been in crypto 11 years, so seen some cycles in my time, and just like really excited for what's coming next in the next sort of like 2 to 10 years of the innovations, the market developments, and all the exciting, dangerous bits in between.
What's been your favorite cycle so far, and why?
You know, what's interesting about this last bear market was I think it was quite devastating in the sense the most teams went out of business, runways like finished, and there was a lot more people building apps, dApps, chain services. So I think that was like probably the most devastating that I've seen, whereas the like 13, 14 was like purely like price speculation on Bitcoin. The 17 was like everything was done on white papers and the teams hadn't really started, or the projects hadn't really like fully kicked off. It was like send ETH to this random website address and maybe they'll do something. And so that last cycle was the first time that there was maybe substantial amount of teams doing stuff. But what was amazing is seeing like how many people stuck it out to like build and like make some amazing stuff, and ultimately those are the ones that like ahead and like causing the catalysts for this next potential uptrend.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. It was, you don't even see now many projects that are even using the ICO model. It tends to be, it's been cooler to see like stuff like Galaxy, Zli, where people are kind of engaging with stuff prior to it, and the incentive is an airdrop at some point in the future, but no one ever really knows how or why or what to do. They just engage with it. And I think that's been quite a nice marketing tactic, I suppose you'd call it, that people have used to get people to figure stuff out and use and like onboard themselves effectively into new protocols, the way in which to interact with them, how to interact with it, and so on.
I think the innovation for capital allocation and how they actually go about doing it is incredibly quick in Web3. Web3 really respects novelty. So when it's like a new type of tokenomics, a new drop, anything around those types of things, they innovate very quickly, and it's very exciting to see like how quickly people flock to this is the next big thing. You saw it with ICOs, then it was IDOs, then there was like the LBPs with like the balancer pools. Those like popped off with Copper and Balancer. And then it's like there's so many new ones coming out at the moment, IEOs, these sorts of things. So I think that was very exciting, and it's a good place to be. It's just like when it's sustainable and when there's like good enough ideas, it's like magic. The rest is not amazing, but that's probably, I don't know what the proportions would be to like normal Web 2 startups that are jank.
You're probably right.
But there you go.
Okay, so you've probably seen kind of helping companies, projects figure out their marketing strategy, a lot of ups and downs. Like, can you speak to any that you've had yourselves at Zebu, or any you've seen go through, and kind of either or, because it's always good to learn from the bad stuff, because we launched a token in late 2020 now, I think, 2021. So kind of caught the end of the bull market, but then, as you say, just had no choice but to build stuff for 2 years, which I think has put us in a good position to deliver what we said we were going to deliver. Like, we've finished our white paper, we always say, which is quite rarefied air, if I may drink our own Kool-Aid. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear if you have any stories from.
Yeah, I mean, firstly on that, it's like you must be one in. Oh, you and Bitcoin are the only ones who've like done the white paper.
Yeah, maybe we weren't ambitious enough, but yeah.
For sure. But I definitely think there's a whole plethora of things to think about with timing the market. And I think like good marketing is like excellent communication, timing, and like a little bit of luck, and then the value that you're bringing. And so I think very rarely do projects have all four of those things. And it does matter with that little bit of luck. Is it a massive green candle on Bitcoin that week when you're doing your IDO that just sends people that little bit. Is it oversubscribed? Then it goes up. Then it gets to mania level. So I think that's hard to handle as a project, but ultimately, like, lots of the value does come through if you have that true value creation, which has been quite hard because you have lots of different projects that some are detached from fundamentals. Pepe, these more culture, these culture or like meme-based tokens, and like people value memes or culture at that level in crypto, like they do, and like it might seem completely mental to someone outside when you're talking to a normal person. So this is worth $1 billion. What does it do? It's just called Pepe.
Literally, it's a frog.
And then you've got the other side of people have got a lot more savvy with thinking projects have solved for the next big thing. I think if you've been in since 2017, you've seen probably like 10,000 projects say they have solved like crypto payments, solved on-ramping, off-ramping, solved every sort of infrastructure or product play or something that's broken in the Web2 world. And we're yet to see that aha moment. And I think people are overzealous to be like, it's all a failure, because it's all just a process. Like the actual innovation has only been going for about 5 years. 2019 is when stuff was starting to get really built. And before then it was mainly just like cryptographers and like smaller style projects or like projects that were made in like 2014, 2015. Whereas now you've actually had like a lot of teams come in, talent consistently joining the ecosystem, big Web2 companies building some stuff that will like maybe start to integrate. We still haven't seen many or if any efficiencies in terms of those products coming through. But this next cycle, you know, a lot of the foundations have been laid in that 21 run. And so now I'm excited to see all of the narratives hopefully come through. No one knows which one will like shoot through, but I think it's been interesting to see mainly how the integrations have started to happen. Like you used to be able to just go on like one dApp and like you only use that. And that's quite clunky if you want to do like a multiple of things. So now you're starting to see like, oh, you can go on here and it can reroute through that protocol and into here. So there's a lot to come.
I agree. I think in my mind, the inflection point will be like, if you think about the way in which, if you buy something, right, you don't say the specific way in which you bought that thing. It doesn't matter. You know, like I cashed those trainers, or I Apple paid my lunch, or I visaed my holiday, you know, like it doesn't matter. You just did the thing that you need to do with the relevant rails at that time. And I still think crypto or blockchain is not quite there, because you do say that you bridged using layer 2A or layer 2B or layer 2C, you know, and it's,
or layer 2Z.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So like it's that to me. And I think we're getting closer to that with that aggregation that you're seeing, where it's just like, I need to do this thing. How do I do this thing? There is a UI of some description that then everything else gets taken care of for me. It's like we've probably experienced that the most when we talk to media agencies, brands that are looking to advertise using Alchemy, right? Like they care about the features that are provided by using a blockchain, but they don't care if it's on a blockchain. They're like, is it more transparent? Are the fees lower? Does it produce lower emissions? And we're like, yeah. So they're like, cool, we'll give it a go, you know, and then we will tell them what's going on in the back end eventually. But for now, you say blockchain to some of these people and they're so busy trying to plan global media campaigns that their eyes roll to the back of their head. Like, we used to go into agencies and be like, right, we'll get you set up with a MetaMask. And they're like, why? Okay, we're quite a long way from you being where we need to be, where this even makes sense to have this conversation. So it's just been a case of telling people about the features, not caring too much about exactly what the underlying technology is, but knowing that it's there for them to learn about when they want to. Because I think that's the big difference, is that quite often centralized or Web2 companies won't tell you, because there's maybe some margin baked into that. But we can and will tell you at the point it makes sense for you to learn about it. So it's kind of just getting people to basically the starting point, which is still, I think, for some people, quite a long way off in the future.
You realize how deep you get in when you like run your own project and you just like read it every day. You're drinking the Kool-Aid. You're just only in the Telegrams and Discords. But I think the bear market's amazing for all entrepreneurs in the space.
Yeah, true.
It's like really tests your mettle. I think what was hard in our personal journeys, we were born in the bull run, and it allowed a huge amount of like inefficiency to creep into your business.
Yeah, fine. Okay.
And I think people had to make very difficult decisions very quickly.
Yeah.
All the big tech companies in Web 2 and definitely in Web 3, you saw like waves and waves of 20, 30, 40% layoffs. You know, just recently Near did 40% of its workforce.
Yeah.
Which are very difficult things to go through.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have it at Alchemist. We definitely had it where we sort of contracted 30, 40% in size. But what that does is it's like some people who came in during the bull run, because there wasn't that many people with Web3 crypto marketing experience, you either take like Web2 people and teach them, or you sort of like take Web3 natives and like maybe develop their marketing like prowess. And I think that some people lost belief, or like it wasn't quite for them. Some people, you know, on the design like side, maybe the volatility is like it's not acceptable for their like what they want as their lifestyle, and that's like completely understandable. And the industry will mature, no doubt. But I think it was a great moment to just like battle test. I saw Peter Thiel speak in Bitcoin Miami, must be like 2 years ago, and he was talking about the financial ecosystems, that all ecosystems are ecosystems, and if you stop small little fires, you'll eventually have one big fire that burns the whole forest down.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that like he was talking up the route up to the financial crisis, where they just like kept saving everything, and then it was just like capitulated.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like you go through those little patches to just like battle test the top 20% fly off.
Yeah.
How's that next chunk of people survive? So that is fantastic work. And we got loads of black swans out.
Yeah,
CZ,
true. Yeah.
CZ out, so that
Luna.
Binance FUD slowed down.
Yeah.
All of the Celsius, FTX, like for the Solana ecosystem, which I'm a huge fan of, there would be question marks over Alameda and SBF if it was getting like back to $200, $300, $400. Like, is it centralized? How much they own? Like, do they have 15% of the supply?
That's true, yeah.
Like, do we want that? Now all of that's like liquidated. Everyone's sort of like speculating where that is. That's a better thing for that blockchain, for sure.
Totally, yeah.
To like get all of that out in the bear. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and you're left with the people that understand the value prop, right? And then want to build upon that, not just like the number's gone up, so I'm in, you know? So I think it does separate the people that, without wanting to sound like a cliche, like are there for the tech. Do you know what I mean? And
I'm in it for the tech.
Yeah, same. We've come this far, you know? It's like, I think it's, and that's what's cool about it, you know? I think that's why you see it with developers that discover blockchain. It's like they were struggling with a challenge that they couldn't solve using Web2 technology, come to a blockchain, and they're like, well, why would I ever go back? Because you can do it in a different way. It makes more sense. Like what I've certainly loved about blockchain is that if you can get yourself in a room with someone, everything you've done prior to that doesn't really matter. People tend to judge you on the merits of what you've done to get yourself in a room with that individual. You know, it can't help, but predominantly you're there on merit, which is quite a cool experience. So, okay, you've done this cool thing. That's really cool. I'll talk to you about this other cool thing that I'm doing. And then you can kind of share the value of that thing much more easily than you would in like a traditional Web2 sense. Even like the way in which stuff's funded, you know, like it's a completely different way of thinking about it, and allows for much more kind of, it's by necessity, I think, because the speed at which you have to make decisions and like slightly change course, then change course, then change course, and change course, but still pushing forward would be tougher with kind of the traditional reporting structure that might come along with like a very standard equity raise. You know, like it's a really cool way of allowing people to innovate fast. It does come with risk, and I think regulation is important. We were talking about it yesterday, but that will come. It's just like the pace at which it will come is quite significant. It needs to come quicker. But
I definitely think that. And I think just like one other bit while it's in my head of marketing in the bear, I think it was a really cool moment when projects have zero marketing budget. They have to get quite creative. Yeah. And I think it actually produced some quite great marketing of lots of projects potentially try to like sprint before they can crawl. And it is that extreme in the sense that we see some quite grandiose business or marketing KPIs, and some of them, you know, revolve around get the next billion people, get the next million. And it's like, you know, Frank de Gods was very acute in saying that he's building his community one fucking amazing person at a time.
Yeah.
And I think like finding your first 100 super fans is the first place you should start as a community builder, and tune into what they have to say. Because when you have 100 super fans that really love you, it's a lot more powerful than like 10,000 people who like mildly like you.
Yeah.
In terms of like onboarding new users, talk word of mouth, you know, you know what it's like in these crypto groups. You're on Telegram, you're on Discord, you're on WhatsApps. If someone wants to rave about you, it is like really, really valuable stuff. So
Totally.
I think like the bear market helped maybe teams realign on that and do other bits. I think you can still do amazing marketing with like huge budgets and low budgets, but it is very dependent on like your project, what your like objectives are, like what your like the app or service is. But I definitely think that was an interesting moment where people were kind of like ground zeroing everything, because it got a bit crazy towards the back end of 21.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. It's like you saying that, I was just thinking about what we did over the last 2 years, and we didn't do it by design. I think we did it by accident, but we created a series of NFTs called Alex the Alchemist. With that, you basically minted them. They had different rarities that came with different perks. Then we built a little game. It was like very Flappy. It was very, very Flappy Birds-esque, but like ran that. And then,
good for the ADHD.
Yeah,
like,
people
out there.
People figured out how, I think my top score was like 200. And then we looked at the leaderboard and people were getting like tens of thousands, and realized there was a little bug where you could beat the game. And I was like, ruined it for everyone. But
I remember back in the day, Flappy Birds, I was there, everyone was there. I was still at outside the University of Sixth Form, and we were just like all day, every day, so competitive, and like what we could get. So it's definitely good ways to keep engagement.
Totally. And I think even stuff like the Solana phone, do you know what I mean? Like I remember I ordered one when it came out, so like that would be cool to play around with. So I had one for ages, and then like had forgotten the thing, forgotten the passcode. In it
for the tech.
Yeah, and then I was like, it'd be fun to play around with that, you know. And then I think I saw it was like checkphone.xyz or something like that, and then I was like, oh shit, I can actually like get some airdropped stuff. This is pretty cool. But even that, the way the operating system works is pretty cool. And now they're sold out. You know, they're releasing a second phone, I think.
100,000 pre-orders, yeah.
It's crazy. Mil. 50 million. That's the way to do it, you know? Like it's... And I've always been saying for a while, like the last Web2 companies were like... became big because of mobile phones, effectively. Like Facebook got to what Meta now got to where it got to because Steve Jobs invented an iPhone, and everyone was like, this is everything I was doing before on my desktop is way better on this really cool phone. And then they kind of rode that wave, and the user experience of instant messaging didn't materially change. It just got slightly better. And then that gave forth to however millions and millions of apps there are now on the respective app stores. And there will be some kind of technology that does that for Web3, for blockchain. And it's like, okay, like I have a go on the Solana phone, because it might be that, you know, and
yeah,
it'd be cool.
I agree. Like someone's not quite come in and thought really radically different about something where everyone's like, that's definitely not gonna work.
Yeah.
But it is like the Apple Mac that's a closed system that suddenly just blew everything out of the water.
Exactly.
That diffusion of all of these very talented cryptographers, like a Charles Hoskinson or a Vitalik, or it's like that merge with like someone really consumer like an Elon Musk.
Yeah.
It's like those founders are very, very, very few and far between.
Totally, yeah.
Like 15, you know, that could do that. And I think that like that killer app, or we don't know what it will be yet, that like 4 billion people use daily.
Yeah, because I think you can tell with like the Apple Vision Pro, right, which is like the newest, sexiest bit of flagship hardware that's come out of Apple.
Are you getting one?
I want to get one. Yeah, I think I probably should. I haven't yet. Like $3,500. Like my laptop battery runs out, so I have to do that first. But you can see that like the Steve Jobs is still there in a little bit, but it's like not, the form isn't quite as tight as it would have been had Steve Jobs designed it. You know what I mean? So like to your point, like that it's very rare that the incumbent innovates in a way that sees it through into the next cycle of whatever that hardware ends up being. So like, I mean, I think like the Nothing phone is quite example, just like looks very different, still is the same underlying operating system, but as a factor is quite cool. Because you see the new iPhone, right? And you get it and you're like, it's so amazing how it just like becomes your old iPhone, but then you're like, oh, it's just my old iPhone again. Like you don't have that like fun experience of when you had like the Motorola phone that swiveled and made a DJ noise, or like the Razor that flipped, you know? So
that was an iconic one. That's when you could have like one Bluetooth song on it and like, go and like trade ringtones.
I was actually chatting to someone yesterday about this new iPhone case called Click, which it's like you put your iPhone in, it's got a whole keyboard at the bottom of it, which is like a BlackBerry-esque keyboard. And I was like, 200 quid, but not yet. Anyway, right. We are going down a tangent.
That used to be just gas fees.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Blockchain, but
yeah. So we're going to catch us looking at our whiteboard, but we've kind of talked about the noise. Like, what do you do as a business to kind of filter it out and see the wood from the trees almost? Like, what do you look for in projects that you think are worth working with? How do you maximize that with projects that you currently are working with? Like, what's your process of, getting rid of the stuff that doesn't matter and focusing on the stuff that does?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because it's like, one, including myself, is not going to be able to tell like if every idea is going to be like good or bad. Obviously, those signs, signals. I think a lot of it is obviously around like the people. Like, are they going about stuff in the correct way? Of like how they're thinking about their projects. Do they want to show up in the way in the world that like you think makes sense? Because otherwise you're going to be just at that loggerhead of like that core philosophy and belief of like what you think is good. And I think like that's a really important point to start on. I think lots of people go off historic achievements, especially for Web3 projects. It's like, it's X who's done this, or like A, B, and C was on like IOHK when they made Cardano, or what, it'll be one of these two or three things that like really drive people. And then the second is like who's backing it. Like people just, Blast is a really great example of like real yield backed by Paradigm, raised 850 million in like 6 days into a multi-sig. And so I think that really stems from a need for trust is so low in Web3, and a lot of stuff's word of mouth. So like if you do have kind of like market verified trust signals, and I'm saying signals because that used to be FTX or Alameda. If they invested in you, it was like you're the creme de la creme, tier one, amazing. So like I wouldn't take so much of those like VC deployments at face value, because there's lots of nuances about funds of funds, how they get their fees, they need to deploy. And so that's very hard when you're just like a retail user trying to do research. Like I've seen a lot of Coinbase ventures. I've invested in like a yield aggregate, or like bought some tokens in one last cycle and just went like straight to zero. So it's like, it happens, it happens. And that's okay, because it's just like, it's a startup, you'd expect. But really those like credibility pillars and unfair advantages, like what are your things that like when a light is shone on them, they like shine brighter and like people can really get behind, and it makes sense quickly. Because I think so many of the projects you ask like, who's doing it amazingly, or like who's previously done something fantastic like it, 90% will tell you that like they're the first in class that are doing it. And so I think that makes it like very difficult on an educational level. On like a user adoption level, it might be like a new chain where like users aren't there. The frictions are like huge, that getting to that first 100 superfans is like way harder than they think. But, so I think like really finding your narrative, like shining bright your unfair advantage and like areas of trust, credibility, these sorts of things, of like why it's going to work. And bear in mind, like it might work right away or it might work a lot later. Like I remember 2017 ICO Request Network. It might have been 2016, and it's like they're now like a really cool like Web3 payroll company, payments on demand, streaming, that kind of stuff. It's like they were like too early in 2017 because nothing was working, but now they've actually managed to survive and do some cool stuff. So people think stuff doesn't work in 6 months, and that's quite hard.
Yeah, I think that's fair because it does take a lot of work. You know, like Chandri will tell you that if you want to, like, it take normally an ad exchange. Yeah, an ad exchange can take between 5 to 10 years to build, right? Like, we managed to do it in about 3. So like we are going pretty quick, but it's 3 years is still quite a long time, you know? So like that, particularly that's like basically what would be a full cycle, 4 years, you call it that.
And think how much you've grown up or like changed over those 3 years just in building that single ad exchange with that. Let's not forget the like transparency is really helpful. And also can be very challenging.
Totally, yeah.
Because communication like 24/7 out to a community is a very like tough thing to manage. And so you're sort of got like you're listed on the NASDAQ, you've got like more transparency of like answering to like shareholders than like you would with these like inbuilt like Telegram, Discord, like whale communities, etc. So I think it's like really helpful, but you also do have to make decisions for like the company and yourself as well. And like it's hard to get all of those comms consistently across to like and clearly so it's not misconstrued. So I think it's like it's an amazing landscape because you're building with evangelists who ultimately hopefully love your project, but that's also there's always like a double-edged sword to it.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely is. It's useful, but because I talk to other ad tech companies and they're like, what's it like being on a blockchain? I'm like, how long have you got? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's cool, but also like there's a whole load of things that I will explain to you and you'll just be like, what on earth are you talking about? Like, why do you do Twitter AMAs? Like, why do you have a Discord? Like, but then equally like the upshot of that is then quite cool comparatively, you know, like we have 40,000 followers on Twitter. That's like a lot of people that follow and effectively an ad tech company that's built on a blockchain, you know? So it's like, it comes with its pound of flesh, I think is probably what I'm trying to say, but I'm still here. I love it.
I think it's like, I don't know why people get so upset about hype.
Yeah.
And why I'd say that is like how many music artists have had like one hit single, how many like fashion brands have done like one thing and then like dropped out. Whatever it is, hype exists because we're humans and like there's more virality in the world. And so when you combine that with the mentalists in crypto, like that's like what you expect. But I also, you know, there's too much, in my opinion, like blame in it's like WeWork was hype.
Yeah, true.
They put paint on the wall and sofas in a building and were worth like 100 billion.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's also insane. They had like a great run and it was all amazing and then they like crashed. But that happens, you know, and that's okay.
Yeah. Still working at WeWork. It was brilliant.
Oh, I love WeWork, by the way. I'm not hating on it. I'm just trying to like highlight like hype happens elsewhere.
I totally agree. Yeah, it was fun. It was like a social club half the time. Do you know what I mean? Like we used to invite clients to come to the office because at midday they turned the beer taps on. Yeah. And they also had a Prosecco tap. So
5 hours too late if you ask me, Ben.
Yeah, well, just keep them open. So you've obviously been running a very successful, excuse me, events company. I think we came to your event. We hadn't met you at that point, but we came to your event in Woolwich. I'm an Arsenal fan, so we came to see the old home of Arsenal, got to go on the Elizabeth line, which is always good. What worked well for you before and like what are you excited about as you kind of grow the event space? I'm excited that you're growing a London-based crypto community because it's not as big as it should be, but yeah, I'd love to hear it from you.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. I think last year was one of those insane journeys for us where we tripled in size in like the deepest bear market there was.
Yeah.
So that was pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
So I think like the excitement this year is like we leveled up in the bear, and like that was obviously like tough from like a commercial standpoint, where budgets were smaller, you had to really work, you had to have all these BD touch points, you had to deliver more value, make sure those deliverables were like smashed, and that's a hard spot to be in. I think this year we're so passionate, like our KPI for Zebu Live is like how many magical moments can you create.
Okay, yeah.
So whether that's like people's first speaking opportunity, are they meeting like friends, are they meeting co-founders, are they going to meet an investor, do you meet an employee at those events? Because we see across the globe events marketing is a huge piece of crypto culture.
Yeah.
It's something about that's like super remote lifestyle and then like mashed up into the weird mixing culture of Web3. So we're very like excited to be at the sort of like cornerstone of really trying to drive the London scene. And that's why we started London Web3 Week last 2 years, which is kind of like the overarching umbrella brand. So last year we had like CC Das in it. It was on the Monday and Tuesday. There was like City AM and all of the stuff that they were doing. And then there was sort of like 30 events throughout the week, because we believe London should be on the map for a destination event. And what I mean by that is when you go to Bitcoin Miami or Singapore for Token or EFCC, I know it's in Brussels, it's like there's a week of stuff and it garners the interest of international teams. And ultimately, like, we want to make sure that there's enough event organizing cool stuff during the week that like everyone's coming. It all brings in the sponsors, the attendees, the excitement, the let's do activations type thing of like, that's fantastic. So this year we're excited to sort of kick on and build out a lot more with the developer stuff. I think like some of the feedback was that we needed like spaces for them to like go and code and write all the clever stuff that's keeping the industry alive. So we're working on that and like trying to get some partners in to do that. So that's really exciting. And we're building out the whole week. So hopefully there's going to be some huge side events. I can't drop any alpha, unfortunately, or I might get murdered.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, that's what we're focusing on. It's still going to be like 3,000-4,000 people, which is a huge undertaking in any case. But we see it as like that intersection of the innovations that are happening. We obviously had all of the kind of like the Man Uniteds come down, Hugo Boss, Google, and that's where we're excited to like conjoin like Web3 into like other tech innovation, AI, these sorts of pieces.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more events, the better, really. It's like, it's fun when you find other people that you don't have to explain the basics of blockchain to them to begin with. And that is where you do start to like level yourself up a little bit when someone tells you something that you haven't thought about, or they found an interesting protocol that's doing something in a certain way, or you name it, really. That's always when I find that I learn the most. And equally, just like being able to speak to other people like yourselves that have like founded a business in blockchain, and that's cool to just like share war stories, and like you can have the knowing look, you're like, fuck, that was tough, you know what I mean?
That was tough. I mean, everyone collectively had a brutal year of building and those sorts of things. And we also have all of the amazing stuff like pitch competitions. Hopefully, Department of Trade, we're going to do like some stuff with like trying to cultivate that hub-based aspect of like supporting businesses that are like trying to raise and do Web3 startups in London, because it's not an easy landscape to from the infrastructure piece to the talent to the regulatory to the legal. Like it is a difficult sort of space to be in. And like, shout out to Stevie at Solana's doing an amazing job with kind of trying to cultivate that Solana community. And we love supporting that super team aspect. And like there's loads of other blockchains that are doing those sort of bits and pieces in pockets. And we want to like shine a light on the fantastic work that's sort of always going on behind the scenes. But like bringing that together is great. And I think event marketing is always like that riddle. Like you have the two most important CEOs in the world in front of you. You have one orange, they both want it. What do you do? And it's like, you ask them why they want it. It might be like Elon Musk wants it because he wants the peel to make a Negroni. Mark Zuckerberg wants it because he wants to make orange juice with the actual orange.
Very
so
nice.
It's like the event marketing is like, you have newsletters, you have PR, you have speaking activations, you have pitching, you have workshops. Like there's so many pieces to it, so many different audience segments. Like, oh, hey, let's like work into here, or like we have this really engaged like startup community. So like, let's get you into that little private Telegram or whatever it might be. There's definitely horses for courses in event marketing, which is awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the cool thing about blockchain is you can develop it anywhere, and remote is brilliant. Like, a lot of our team is remote, but equally we do try and get people together, because I think there's a lot to be said for it's much easier to build culture when you're sat in a room like we are now than it is over Telegram, on Zoom, or whatever it is, you know. Like,
I see you in their virtual cocktail class.
Yeah, they're great, but like, equally, like, it's cool when you can do like an actual cocktail class, you know. So like, yeah, it's awesome.
I think the spontaneity between team members is like a really core thing to build, and like, when you have been with people, then you kind of get that flow a bit easier. And then even when you take it back online, I think it's definitely possible to like continue it, but stuff moves so quickly that can you spitball, or like, can you go for lunch and just talk around a problem that's not that half an hour G meet where you can't quite get there, where it's like over a overpriced Pret sandwich. That's where you can
easily done, just down the corner. So we've kind of spoken about, we talked around it, but like, how are you feeling about the market? There's been some like landmark events, like I would think about the ETFs in America, that kind of set the scene for perhaps just making everything else, the numbers associated with everything else, obsolete comparatively. But yeah, would love to hear your take on.
Do you know what I think is really interesting? I think it's like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect. Yeah. It's like, you know, when you know nothing, your confidence is 100.
Yeah.
And then as you learn more, it parabolas down. And then as you become like an expert, it goes back up.
Yeah.
Really interesting to try and like place yourself in terms of your like Web3 crypto market knowledge of like where you are.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because I think some people like become it in and like really bullish and like allocating into like crazy stuff that might end up like going up.
Yeah.
And then I think you can get like more timid as you realize how much you don't know, but you actually know more than you do. So it's hard to position yourself. And this is where someone like Raoul Pal is so fantastic at, he can speak at so many different complexity levels.
Yeah.
So when he talks like really in-depth macro, like very technical, he can speak at like level 6 expert level.
Yeah.
But he can then do like threads that are really, anyone could almost read them as like no economic grounding or like understanding of like the charts or Solana or like whatever he's charting. And so it's like, that's a very interesting like place to be, because when you've been in crypto so long, I've got a very high amount of friends that get like anchored to like where they got in, or like resistance to like changing that anchor, and behavioral biases are just like so hard to like unwrite. So I think like the market looking forwards, you never know that when Bitcoin's 50K, that feels kind of expensive to me, but someone coming in, who knows how big these ETFs, all the data coming out, it's like they're gobbling up 10,000 Bitcoin a day. After the halving, it's only 450 being created. Supply and demand is kind of obvious when you look at it like that. But I think, you know, that's a hard bit. That's like obviously very much focused on Bitcoin. I think the innovation in Web3 is like undoubtedly deniable, that like tokenization of digital assets is going to massively increase in the next 10 years.
100%. Yeah.
Whether that's all going to be like speculative or value driven, like not many people like could fundamentally say that. But we saw Alan Howard, who obviously founder of like Brevin Howard and Weben, some of the biggest hedge funds, and he saw him speak in Abu Dhabi Finance Week, and he was just like categoric about the direction of travel and how much more is going to be like digital asset based. So it's like how that flows, where it flows, I'm not sure. I definitely think the capability of like teams in the space is increasing exponentially, and that is only going to lead to like more value creation. So I don't know what you should go and like sling your money into or like the NFA type style, but I am very bullish on the future of like what's going to be built, and like there is going to be an aha, like just and we've seen little pockets of it, like SocialFi, which was kind of like a cheeky little Web2 front end, Web3 in the back end. That like mad virality just like broke out the blocks, and actually lots of Web2 people onboarded into that. And so that's an interesting space. And it could be something like that just suddenly like, oh, people suddenly have ETH in their wallet because they use a SocialFi app.
Yeah.
And then they sort of get a native wallet and jump onto other stuff. So there will be a lot of amazing innovations. Some of them will be like terrible, as you'll get with anything. But yeah, I'm very excited to see like what happens in the future. I mean, it's not going to be like, oh, I'm massive on this ecosystem or that. But it'll be, you know, some amazing founders create some value.
Yeah, I think while you were talking then, I was just thinking about like the stick that you often hit Ethereum with is like the transaction fees or the gas fees. But what's cool about a transaction over Ethereum is that you pay, say worst case scenario, $150 for a transaction. That is expensive if you're really close to the transaction. It's like me sending something over, swapping something on Uniswap, and it's $50, right? But when you think about the way that businesses operate transactions, it's like, okay, it might be ultimately it's free, pretty much free to send money from bank account A to bank account B. But what isn't really considered because of the type of people so far, which has been evangelists, as you say, early adopters, when they're looking at transactions, is that in larger organizations, it's not just the cost of A to B, it's the financial controller, the auditor, the CFO, there's a lot of people and salaries involved in the cost of a transaction, and there is still a cost to the transaction at that point anyway. And I think as larger businesses, institutions, whoever it is, realize I'd almost call it like qualitative but equally quantitative saving of just having a smart contract take care of something that is settled pretty much instantly if you compare to how financial transactions are settled longer term, in like the bank settlements, wherever it is. That to me, I think will be people are like, oh, okay, I kind of get it now. Do you know what I mean? Like,
all of the future, from what I've sort of read or think about, it's app chain.
Yeah,
like
totally.
Very much like horses for courses was like great interoperability from like one interface. You can kind of do X, Y, and Z, or like, you know, there's loads of betting chains that are like specifically focused on that have their little Telegram bots for doing bits and bobs like that. And then there'll be, you know, ZK payment layers. There'll be all those things in between of like what you do on that chain, because all of like that blockchain trilemma of like security, like decentralization, like speed, it just like, it doesn't make sense to have like something like so secure. It's like having 7 locks on every window and door in your house. Like, it's not practical to leave the house every day and spend like 4 hours locking it up, because you don't need that. So it's like it'll all like work itself out. There'll be some really clever people, and they'll build such good systems that we won't have to talk about the systems.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Like, we don't talk about like the Swift network, or like like you might hear like, oh, what's your IBAN number and these sorts of things, but no one's like, is the double modal like transistor sequencer on Swift like moving at the same pace as IBAN or these sorts of things. So I think once we get out of that, that's going to be exciting, because lots of people talk about blockchain education, and you very rarely like would teach someone about the internet. Like, internet education isn't like, how does the World Wide Web work? It's like, what does it do?
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, I think it's as like I was saying earlier, it's a lot of the conversation. We have an app chain, right? Like, our blockchain is built specifically, or the layer 2 of it is built specifically for buying and selling ads online. And I think that when I got a degree in product design, and one of the things that they teach you is you have to solve a specific problem for an individual and hope there's a lot of those individuals with that problem for that product to be successful. And I think a lot of where we're at a lot of the time with developments of blockchain is like, you could basically build anything on our chain, then you end up trying to build something that can facilitate any use case. And that is virtually impossible to deliver well for all of those different points. So I think you're exactly right in saying that the specificity of a chain and the problem that it solves ultimately is great for adoption, because it like centralizes the use case for that specific thing, rather than it's still then decentralized on the back end and all the benefits that that promotes, but ultimately the point of entry is quite specific and niche, which then just makes it easier for people to understand what they use it for. It just becomes explicit, basically, because of the endpoint that you interact with, and less so about the thing that makes that endpoint possible, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Cool. Well, we've got to the end of our whiteboard. Millie always tells me off for looking at the whiteboard, and even talking about it's probably worse. But it's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Guess you've had some fun.
We have, yeah. I've enjoyed it. There's what you can't see is the lights in our face as well. So if anyone's as old as I am, it looks like the Misterons. But it's been a pleasure having you, mate. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.